At this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Oh, who will present a resolution urging the United States Congress to investigate the involuntary discharge of Sergeant First Class Charles Martland from the United States Army, and urging that he be retained in the military, with Captain Nicholas Panarella, Jr. of the U.S. Army Special Forces and decorated Vietnam combat veteran. And those accompanying him, please join the councilman at the podium at this time.
Thank you, Council President. I would like to invite also Colonel Tim Williams, retired, Special Forces Chapter 38, Buddy Rhodes, Chapter 64, Mike Force Association, James Weisbrod, Chapter 57, Jack McFadden, Treasurer, Chapter 64, Bob Wagner, Chapter 19, and Bob McDowell, Chapter 64, Mike Force Association. While they assemble, I'd like to state, because I know this is a little unusual, that while we talk about freedom and even terrorism, just as no individual can be free all by themselves, so no nation can be free all by itself. And the United States has been the nation that has lit the light of democracy around the world. And overseas, there are people who are fighting for their freedoms and their dignities, and many of them are right now fighting in the Middle East. And some see these entire groups of people as enemies, while other people see them as friends, allies, and fellow fighters for democracy. None more so than the U.S. Army Special Forces, who are also known as the U.S. Army Green Berets, who have a special mission and a small group of soldiers embedded without much support, living off the land, making allies and gathering support to fight the enemies of democracy. They have to make decisions critical to their own life and to the pursuit of democracy, and in that they need the support not only of our government but of the American people. This is a situation where a Green Beret is being involuntary discharged from the Army, not for making a hard choice where a life had to be taken, but for making a hard choice where child abuse would not be tolerated. And for that, it is a severe punishment to involuntarily discharge him from the military. And so I appreciate all of the Special Forces community that support this issue. And I'd like to read this resolution and then present this copies to the Special Forces Association National Headquarters and chapters that are involved in this support. This is a resolution urging the United States Congress to investigate the involuntary discharge of Sergeant First Class Charles Martland from the United States Army and urging that he be retained in the military. Whereas in September 2011, Sergeant First Class Charles Martland was serving in the Afghanistan war-torn Kunduz province, where he's a member of the United States Army Special Forces A-Team, commonly referred to as Green Berets. It was tasked with establishing a new local police force with the support of local Afghan tribal leaders. And whereas Sergeant First Class Martland and his team commander, Captain Dan Quinn, were approached by a local mother and her child who was limping, she told them that the local Afghan police commander, Abdul Rahman, who was trained and supported by their team, had kept the 12-year-old boy as a sex slave. Abdul Rahman kidnapped the boy and kept him tied to a post in his house, where he was brutally raped by Rahman for over 10 days. And whereas the boy's mother desperately sought the release of her son, Abdul Rahman beat her for complaining to the authorities. And whereas Captain Quinn and Sergeant First Class Martland questioned Abdul Rahman about the matter, and he responded by laughing and saying it was not an important matter, Captain Quinn picked up Abdul Rahman and body slammed him to the ground. Sergeant First Class Martland followed up with a kick. And whereas Captain Quinn was immediately relieved of his command, he has since left the military. Sergeant First Class Martland was placed under the Army's Qualitative Management Program, a process that can be triggered by derogatory information on their record, which aids in weeding out less desirable soldiers, leaving a black mark on their record. And whereas, as a result, Sergeant First Class Martland an 11-year combat decorated Special Forces NCO, was to be discharged from the Army by November 1st. Martland appealed the decision, but the U.S. Army Human Resources Command told Martland that his case did not meet the criteria for the appeal. And whereas Captain Quinn stated in an interview with the New York Times, quote, "The reason we were here is because we heard the terrible things that the Taliban were doing to people, how they were taking away human rights. But we were putting people into power who would do the things that were worse than the Taliban did. That was something village elders voiced to me," end quote. And whereas Congressman Dan Hunter has asked the Secretary of Defense to intervene in Martland's behalf, and whereas American soldiers have been instructed not to intervene, in some cases not even when their Afghan allies are abusing boys on the military bases, according to interviews and court records, and whereas the New York Times reports that the policy of instructing soldiers to ignore child sexual abuse by their Afghan allies is coming under new scrutiny, particularly as it emerges that service members like Captain Quinn have faced discipline, even career ruin, for disobeying it. And whereas the case has become a national concern, American citizens should voice their opinion to provide guidance to our government and our military. Our democracy depends on the citizen soldier, and they pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America. We are not protected by mercenaries, but by American citizens who bring American values and the light of democracy with them wherever they go. Whereas the United States holds as its highest ideals freedom, democracy, and self-determination, as the birthplace of this nation, Philadelphia steps forward to provide moral leadership on this issue. And whereas Special Forces Association serves as a voice for the Special Forces community, perpetuates Special Forces traditions and brotherhood, advances the public image of Special Forces, and promotes the general welfare of the Special Forces community. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Philadelphia that we hereby urge the United States Congress to investigate the involuntary discharge of Sergeant First Class Charles Martland from the United States Army and that he be retained in the military. And be it further resolved that engrossed copies of this resolution be presented to the Special Forces Association National Headquarters, Special Forces Associations Chapter 64, 26, and Chapter 19, evidencing the sincere admiration and respect of this legislative body. Thank you.
And the chair recognizes Captain Panarella for remarks.
Thank you. I will be brief. First, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for this proclamation. You're hitting the nail on the head. But I have to say that if you're going to use Special Forces in the roles in which they have been trained to do, then you're only really starting to see the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's going on. David has described what happened in this case. But basically, if you've listened now, our president has said we are going to use Special Operation Forces in order to fight truly the war on terror because it's a much smaller footprint. Some of us served in Vietnam, some in the Gulf War. Each of us was a force multiplier. In Vietnam, there were roughly 3,000 Americans that trained, organized, equipped, and led 60,000 Montagnards. Montagnards were intrinsically adverse to Vietnamese. They were their natural enemies. They were our most effective fighters. I absolutely guarantee Sergeant Martland, with the aid of his commander, made a value judgment and said, this situation is deplorable, but how do we best accomplish the mission that we were assigned to perform? And they made a judgment that, if you will, winning the hearts and minds of the population and the force that they worked with was best served by the action that they took. That can't be second-guessed by people who don't have that training, who weren't there, and who basically look at things in a different frame of reference. I'll leave you with a parable that you can ask yourself without an answer, but I personally know from whence I speak. You're on a battlefield. An enemy combatant who's attempting to inflict serious bodily injury on you is in fact struck. You look at him after the firefight, you make an assessment that that individual has a mortal wound unless he's evac'd. Your men who fight these people and have done it from before you came till after you were left, till you were going to leave, knew that if the situation were reversed, the horrific pain and suffering that would be inflicted upon them before they expired. So your men are looking at you and trying to make a decision to see what you're going to do. Because if you call in a medevac to get that gentleman out, you're going to leave yourself in an exposed position which will invite the enemy to come and basically renew the fight, and perhaps with a different outcome. If you don't evac him, he's going to die. If you leave him alive, he is a threat to your unit because he can reveal information about the direction that you go, if nothing else. Decisions like that remain and should remain on the battlefield. Okay? And that's the world that we live in, that we fight in, that we chose. A city runs really well, with the city solicitor, right? Okay. That's not how a war should be fought. Rules of engagement should be promulgated, but then left to the discretion of those who are executing the mission. And when you empower a small group of highly trained individuals, okay, who come from they are the best that America has to offer, today's force, then you need to let them do their mission. And they cannot be looking over their shoulder and having that mission, absent some egregious act, questioned. I gave Dave, I run our national magazine. This issue is so important to us that I had asked a former colonel who was Special Forces and a JAG to do an article. My best friend's son is getting ready to deploy for his first time to Afghanistan. I sent him the issue. And you know what it deals with? It deals with a SF's operator's rights, criminal rights, of what to do if you're confronted with a criminal investigation for violating the rules of engagement. Ask yourself if you would want your sons and daughters to be confronted by that issue. Okay. Thank you very much.
What I'd like to say that Captain Panarella, who I'm proud to say was my commanding officer, is stating is that right now, when our soldiers are making life and death situations, and in this case, to protect human rights, they face jail and career ruin if they are second-guessed. Certainly, it's important for the American public to let our government know that we support our troops and the tough decisions they have to make when we put them in life and death situations. Thank you very much.
Council, be at ease.
So I just wanted you to see. Okay, just so you know, I mean.